So welcome.
Yeah, welcome, and we'll start with the meetings minutes. How's that?
All right, I think, so John, you were walking in, I think, I did not give you credit for attending.
No, I need credit. I was here.
Okay.
I did leave early, but I was here.
All right, so I will make that adjustment.
What was the adjustment?
That I was
John.
present.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I was looking at his Zoom, so.
You got home in time for election results.
That's right, it was election night. That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
Okay, so that was number one here. So number two, is this month's topic, and welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. If you're here for the Milton Comp Plan Advisory Committee meeting, you're in the
Dave,
right
did you want
place.
to take a seat up there?
So maybe, for the benefit, of, folks who have not, joined us previously or frequented our monthly gatherings, I'll give a quick overview of,
Setting project.
the sort of the process and where we are and how we're kind of structuring the development of the plan. We started back in, I think it was February, with our first topic in March. And so the committee was appointed by the town board, and we've been working since about February. The plan is the town's first update really comprehensive update in about 2 decades. The town undertook a limited sort of update and reaffirmation back in 2012, 2014, I
12,
believe,
yeah.
2012. So, it's time. The way and my name's Adam Yagelski. I'm with Delaware Engineering, and our firm, the town, engaged us to support the town in the planning process. The process we're using, we've broken it down, working with the committee into these 13 topics. I'm sorry, eight topics. So the topic areas these are ultimately going to be sort of the chapters of the plan. You can kind of see how they're structured and grouped. And for each topic, so this, the committee, we're asking, and they have been obliging, in terms of doing the hard work of getting into each of these topic areas and discussing the details. We're not at the direction setting and sort of vision part yet. We're still kind of existing conditions, strengths, weaknesses, challenges associated with each of these topics. But the committee is essentially doing a lot of the heavy lifting to help us develop and to develop each of these chapters of the plan. So for each of these topics, except for infrastructure and community services, we've been fortunate to have folks like yourselves here, guest voices, interested voices, stakeholders who have some expertise or who can bring a perspective to these topics. And so today, we're talking about transportation, accessibility, and mobility, and so we're really fortunate to have you guys here. And I also want to mention we have Dave Talion from Labella, and Dave Bramer, who's the town's comptroller and project manager on a separate linkage study that Chris is also has kind of taken over the PM role on, and that's a transportation, I think we talked about it a little bit here, focus study on the town center area. They're also here, sort of listening, and as they're developing their recommendations for that planning effort, they're here to kind of also be a sounding board if we're talking town center and some of the stuff they've learned too. We did have one public meeting. We had a community survey that we're going to summarize here in a little bit. And we're going to have, we will do one more public meeting once we get to the direction setting and some of the strategies, and to address some of these broad topic areas and the goals we identified. So that's kind of where we are in the process. Probably late spring, I would say, is when we'll probably be close to having a draft. It might be early summer before it gets to the town board at this point. So that's kind of where we
And I want to let everybody know on this committee, you're being reappointed. Your sentence has been stretched out a little. Well, it makes sense to keep the committee together because we're going into next year with other topics and the conclusion of this hopefully, and then get into some of the zoning, so.
So before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts, maybe we could go around the room, at least around the table, and you guys, especially you guys, can introduce yourselves. And so I'm Adam with Delaware Engineering. Again, helping the town with this with the planning process.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Simone. I'm with the New York State DOT Region 1 in planning and programming.
Audrey Bernison, New York State DOT Region 1 Planning.
Hi, Chris Bauer, Director of Transportation Planning at the Capital Region Transportation Council, and also working now on the town center plan as well.
John, introduce yourself.
Oh, John Bartow, I'm Chairman of the Planning Board and member of this committee.
I'm John Olenek, Director of Economic Planning.
Meg Soden, the Milton Town Board.
John Mancini, no power, no authority, just a member.
Barb Kerr, Deputy Supervisor, Councilwoman, and Chair of this committee.
So thank you again, Matt, Audrey, and Chris, for being here. I want to set the stage here with a couple of things. First, kind of what we mean by the three sort of dimensions of this month's topic, and then run through, hopefully not in sort of quicker fashion, some sort of basic inventory and some existing conditions for each of the town's major transportation modes. On this slide, and then we'll turn it, and then we'll go by mode to talk about, we'll take that same approach we've taken with the other topics and look at, strengths, issues, and then challenges in terms of addressing those issues for each of those modes. And then I think we'll have, we also have from our regional voices here, we'll have a little bit of their perspective to the extent you guys want to weigh in, and then obviously from your standpoints, and then we'll kind of get into those individual modes, and there will be opportunities to, we kind of have a little bit more of an open discussion about some of those, about some of the details of the topic. So to start with, when these three terms, right? Transportation, right? Is what I want to break these kind of out because they, at the beginning, because they sort of suggest different ways of looking at and approaching the overall idea about how goods and people move, in the town. And so with this first term, we're talking about sort of the system, right? The physical system as well as the various modes, whether it's, vehicle, truck, bike, ped, air. So that's sort of transportation, right? The second dimension of this is accessibility, right? So, and accessibility and mobility you'll often see these, there's kind of some nuance, and I think sometimes they're used interchangeably, but when you talk about accessibility, you're talking about, and how I want to sort of use it here, is a way into understanding, as it says here, the relative ease with which people can reach destinations, in the town. So this might be using multiple modes, it might be using multiple parts of the town's transportation system, but fundamentally it's about sort of that friction that the system presents, whether it's because of changing modes, like if you're putting your bike on a bus, or difficulty getting as a pedestrian once you park your car to your next destination. So this implies, and we talked a little bit about sort of destinations and places last time. So this is kind of a related idea. Instead of those activity centers and stuff where people gather, this is how well they're connected to the town's transportation system. And then mobility is sort of, the use of that system, right? It's about sort of the volume and the quality of those movements. And I would put under here things like safety, the condition of the system, of its various elements, and that type of consideration. So you can measure this in a lot of different ways. Like we'll look at average annual daily demand or trips, which is a common measure of the amount of traffic, vehicle traffic a road sees. And then under this one also, there's a dimension under mobility of the ease with which different groups having, social groups having different characteristics, mobility characteristics, for example, are able to use the system and move within it. So, that's sort of the high level, sort of the different dimensions of transportation, right? So for these next slides go through sort of the various modes. So the first one is vehicle-based, and there to some extent there's artificial distinctions because like the road network is for single vehicle occupancy, but also it's used to move goods. It's the roadbed for for transit. So, but the bulk of people traveling in and through Milton are using its road network primarily in single occupancy or private vehicles, right? And so these are data from DOT. They're 2023 data, and this just gives an overview of the volume on the town's road network that where DOT has inventoried. Some of these represent actual counts, most of them represent estimates, and you can see that the busiest corridors are the Route 50 corridor and the county and then the state roads 23, 29 and 63, or 67, I'm sorry, along the town's north and south borders. But, there's still a fairly significant amount of traffic at this intersection as well, right here outside of Town Hall. So another way to think about this is sort of the town's main vehicle arteries in any event. The town's road network, most of these are not town roads. Out here, the town owns portions of Rowland and Geyser. But when the town has, I want to say it was think it was about 72 lane miles. I'm sorry, 72 center line miles, 150 lane miles, and that's just road that it owns and maintains. The county in town has about 50 lane miles. And, when you look at all the lane miles for towns in Saratoga County, this town's about average, right? It doesn't have the largest system, but it doesn't have a smaller system either. It's kind of average, despite its, sort of the more rural parts, of the western part of the town. Most of the town's road network is classified as sort of local streets. So they're really to get you to those collectors, materials, and then out to, things like 87. And so this map also reflects kind of a hierarchy too. There are, our guests talk a lot about hierarchy and what that means from a transportation and a funding perspective and all of that. But so just so that's kind of, we're looking at existing conditions on the road network. These are some of the things we're talking about. The town also has, I believe it's either 3 or 4 bridges that it owns, and they're all on, I believe they're around, what's the name of the road here? I don't have it in my notes. So there are, those are, it's, the National Bridge Inventory shows those bridges as being in, both, 2 of them are in good condition and 1 of them is in fair condition. I think they're relatively new, at least, 1 of them dates to the 90s. I'm trying to remember the name of the roads that they carry, but they basically cross the Galaji Creek and, the Cateras.
So those are on town roads?
They're on town roads, yeah, it's not Rock City.
It's a
It's
county.
it's the one that goes
It's like
off
Brewer,
of Rock City.
Durant Lane?
Yeah, Lewis, I think. was
Yes,
the other one.
Lewis.
Could be
Yeah.
over there,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
That's one of them for sure, I don't know.
okay. The complete replacement? Yeah, with Bridge New York funding or? No, just, yeah. Local authority. Bridges are not cheap.
No. Surprised we only have 3.
Yeah, yes, most of them are on the county system. There are a few on the state system.
Now, is this just car traffic or bus, transport as well?
This is all vehicle, all classes, so,
Okay.
it would include buses, and it does, the DOT data does break it out by, truck traffic, but unless there's like a continuous count station, you're not gonna get each individual class. So I think these are all, I don't think there are any, maybe on Route 50, there might be a continuous,
Oh, a continuous count station.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly where they are.
Yeah, but probably nothing in.
Route 50, but the bus just started back to this route,
Yeah,
Yeah.
through town center,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's
So-
total daily trips.
yeah, and that's over a year
Yeah.
average. The counts, what are typically a week or so or 2,
Usually,
yeah.
you can target specific times if they look over throughout the day.
And that average is also to account for, there's some seasonal variation obviously around here, and those averages will sort of factor that in as well. So the next sort of existing conditions is bike ped, and what we're talking about here is separate, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and this is just a little screen grab from CRTC sidewalk inventory that I think was 2018, and I think those there's some data, there's some extensions of the sidewalks that have gone north and south that aren't captured here. This is Geyser, we're kind of right here, and Rowland is here. So there's a few more sidewalks in the town center area. But in general, the town really, outside of the village, doesn't, there aren't a lot of sidewalk facilities,
Not a lot of connections.
Connections, yeah, that's the issue.
When you say, connection, they say that,
Well,
what do you mean?
you have one area that would, a business or
Bike paths.
something was,
Yeah,
had to put a sidewalk in, and then you have a blank spot, and
Yeah.
so,
I mean, those have been resolved pretty much in the town
in
center.
town center, yeah.
center.
But there's no connection to neighborhoods in the town
No
center.
connection to
pedestrian
neighborhoods, no
walking.
connection
Yes.
to Woods
Speak
Hollow.
of.
Right,
There's, and that's where we heard in one of the other transportation committee groups of a possible, could you get a sidewalk from the senior housing down at North Line and,
all the way.
all the way up to town
Yeah.
center?
That's why people are
Which would
talking-
start to mean, from there you'd pick up 3 or 4 neighborhoods.
People are also requesting up to Stone Church, and I think that's part of it.
Yep. But there's not too many neighborhoods.
There
So,
will be soon.
Yeah.
and the other, Route 50 as well, I took a quick look at the Route 50 corridor study that, I think MJ Engineering worked with the town on a little while ago. And they had made a bunch of recommendations about, pedestrian connectivity, complete streets type, recommendations, crosswalks and stuff like that. I took a quick virtual look at Route 50 and it didn't look like in the town there were, hardly any side, or any.
No, but there is in the Route 50 corridor study that was done just 3 or 4 years ago.
Recommendations.
Very much having bicycle and sidewalk pedestrian connections.
And then for bike, technically, it's, bicyclists should not, I believe under state law, it's illegal for bicyclists to ride on the sidewalk.
Correct.
So, this is also about, and what we're talking about here is not necessarily sort of recreational paths like the Milton Mile. Although the Milton Mile kind of crosses, it sort of crosses that rec transportation facility. It connects kind of parts south and west of here, the Wood Thrush Court area. There's neighborhoods to the south and west
That connect.
up to town, basically up to the Burgess Kimball Park here. So the town did that within the past year. So it's an example of a shared facility that, it probably serves some transportation function to get people up to some of the destinations at the town center from those neighborhoods. But, and I know there have been plans for, at various levels, regional plans, town trails plans that have recommended, say a shared use path around the airport, for example, to sort of connect a lot of those destinations. But this is separate facilities for, bicycle, bicycle as a transportation mode. And there are essentially, maybe with the possible exception of, the Milton Mile, there really aren't any in town. I mean, these facilities would also include like sort of striped, what you call sharrows, you'll
Yeah.
see the little bicycle in the lane,
So like, it's like the Saratoga Trail that comes up to our town line, and then it kind of,
it stops at a sidewalk,
well, it's also for bikes, so it's. just-
That is, yeah.
Yes,
It's.
when it comes right up to a sidewalk and,
And just, yeah, it stops, yeah. So there's a variety of, other types of bike facilities, and treatments that you might apply depending on, the level of traffic, the facility and, cost consideration, that type of stuff. But the town really doesn't have them at this point. Talking transit, right? We talked, so I guess, so there's really two there's two different types of transit service in the town. The first is, this lower right, the Park and Ride, which is just right over here. This gets commuter bus service from CDTA's Northway Express and, connects with, mainly with parts south of here, is my understanding, mainly, down in the city of Albany. And that serves primarily commuters. You drive here, maybe you walk if you're close by, you pick up the bus. There's a bus shelter over there. There's some lighting and there's a bunch of parking. So the town does have, I guess it was recently reinstated, maybe is the word, not the best word. The Route 450, which goes between Wilton and Schenectady, this has stops during weekdays during one stop, I think it's one stop in the morning and one stop in the evening in the town. On this spur, there are more stops, more frequent stops on Route 50. But when it deviates that Route 50 corridor, it doesn't have the frequency of service. So it does connect here, but not really outside of the sort of the morning PM peak hours. Just the airport, and without getting too much into this, it's a general aviation airport. I pulled this from the county airport master plan, which the county had recently updated in 2015. They have some recommendations, and there's a fairly extensive and I think federally mandated airport planning process that they have to go through. So there's a fair bit of interesting information in there. You can kind of, when this operations is any takeoff or touchdown, I guess. And so it's a measure of sort of the throughput at a general aviation airport. And you can see kind of where Saratoga County falls relative to some of these other airports, in New York State. Not the most busy, but not the, certainly well used. And one of the interesting things is they do have this unique aviation activity discussion. And so the operations here also reflect these glider operations, which I guess there are two glider companies based at the airport. And they, it actually accounts for three operations. You get the two vehicles taking off, or aircraft, I guess, and then they take off together and then they land separately. So that's kind of interesting. And then the other kind of unique aspect of this airport is its seasonality. It really peaks at, during the track season. One of the, kind of the hookup to some of our economic development discussion, when the state commissioner of transportation recently announced some of the funding for the improvements to the airport here, they talked about the idea that, Global Foundries is here, and this is a real asset from kind of a, connecting Saratoga County and Milton to, the larger international, national economy, even regional economy. Freight and goods movement. So this is that same data set from DOT, but with percent trucks. So, and this is both combination and then, single, or I guess you have to remind me, it might be triaxle, and then it's single unit, and then I think combination unit is the breakdown. So it's tractor trailers versus, straight trucks,
Box truck.
delivery vans, yeah. Let's see. The freight traffic really sort of clusters along and concentrates along this Route 29 corridor, and this is of course where the two quarries are. There's also, Stewart's, there's some freight generating facilities in the area, Stewart's up here.
What you get on 29 really is, it's a major cutoff route from Ames-O Fonda to the Northway.
Right, yeah.
So it's just, people avoid several tolls and traffic. It's a shorter distance. You get a lot of traffic doing it.
And then I think, as we were kind of talking, Chris, during our the call we had in prep for this, they shunt out onto Route 9 and probably pick up the Northway, at exit 15, right? So they're sort of transiting through Saratoga. That's probably a common movement.
Sure, and there's a lot of destinations too, like the industrial park. So in addition to whatever through traffic there is, it's not easy to quantify what's through and what's local, but there's certainly a lot of things that generate a lot of trucks, when you generate the standard.
And I think in terms of within the town, so, one other aspect of this is kind of interesting. This looks like, this might be maybe related to the airport, but I don't know what road I didn't drill into that. But the, CRTC has, and Chris, I think you were responsible for the freight plan for the region, and that identifies a freight priority network, and Route 50 through the town is on that network. I think I don't know, does it extend all the way through Milton into Saratoga? Or does it stop at the village?
No, it connects back up into
The 87.
the Wilton and up there.
And so one of the things, some of the criteria, and I just pulled this from the freight plan, over 1,000 trucks per day and over 15% truck traffic. And the facility must also have greater than 3,000 total vehicle trips per day. So, doesn't have to, it's a pretty low bar. And then it also must provide a connection, and this is a minor freight route. So there's a hierarchy there. Like 87 would be sort of the primary freight network. Something like Route 50 is sort of the next level down. And then there's sort of connectors, like from a major intermodal facility or cluster of facilities like rail, truck, container traffic, or cars going to something like Route 50, then to the major network. So one of the things that this allows, there's some federal funding, there's sort of a priority from a regional and even a state level planning standpoint for those facilities identified on the freight network. And so, if it's 15% truck trips per day, you can see that there are parts of the town that do come close to that. They don't necessarily hit that threshold, but there are some roads with, still some significant truck traffic on them.
These dump trucks too,
It would be both, yeah.
like for transported dirt, rocks, all that, so pump up, but I was looking at that 8%, I bet that's a new neighborhood that,
This one here?
yeah,
Oh, right, like under construction?
Yes. Yeah.
Right, yeah, construction, it would probably, it would, I think it would pick up construction traffic, yeah, it doesn't differentiate why, yeah.
And that's the thing about truck counts in general, is that, cars are a little easier to predict. Most people do the same thing every day, or, if you count the number of cars on the road, a lot of roads would be very similar, but like to the point you just made, if you have a project going on, there's happens to be, they're paving that day, and that also happens to be the day that, you know, somewhere between there and the asphalt plant, they're counting trucks.
Yep.
It maybe look like the number is higher, or the opposite, you know, it could just be a slow day or whatever. So truck counts can, I think, probably have like a wider,
Yeah.
you know, I would put less like stock in these than maybe I would just like the straight.
Regular.
counts.
Yeah, gotcha.
But still, I think this emphasizes.
And in terms of the freight generating facilities, they're really, that's another thing, like, especially from a land use planning standpoint, there's kind of intersecting strategies and issues, with freight facilities. I mean, I don't think much, if anything, moves through the airport because it's a general aviation, facility. We talked about, the quarries up here. I'm sure there's some movements associated with Kesselring. But then what you're really talking about is probably, in addition to some of those through movements, it's really kind of that final mile type deliveries to places like Hannaford or some of the storefronts and businesses along Route 50.
Yeah, I think the two biggest contributors we get, you're right, is the mines and then Grandy Industrial Park.
And
So it's a lot of freight through, they're either trying to get up to 29 to head west or 67
Well, any place west,
or
29
south on 50.
or 67.
Yeah.
So that's kind of from a freight standpoint. So the other, in terms of, this is sort of getting at mobility and, again, relying on Chris's colleagues at CRTC. There was a CRTC put together a pedestrian or a local roads safety plan, and kind of did what DOT does for its whole system for the region's local roads. And one of the interesting things is, and Milton, like they focused on several crash types that generally, occur on the region's local system. And then within those types, they broke those further down by county. And then by town to kind of arrive at a municipal focus. And so the study for a variety of different crash types, and there's a few here listed, has, proportion of the county population, and then it has proportion of crashes for various types assigned to that municipality. And then the study sort of identifies municipalities where those crash types are potentially overrepresented based on the population versus the proportion of crashes that occur in the county in that municipality. And Milton showed up in these 6 areas, and so most of these are, and this, you could see that it was the data were from 2011 to 16. The one that I wanted to kind of point out, these are one of the things that for like lane departure, that's really this is serious injury and fatality crashes, so not just property damage. Somebody lost their life or they went to the hospital. So lane departure crashes are sort of a rural phenomenon, right? You've got, geometric issues on higher speeds, less lighting, to light up issues on the road, whatever. So that's a kind of a common rural, crash type. Motorcycle crashes happen kind of throughout the region, rural or urban. And these are sort of age-related, might also be related to some other like, say distracted or impaired, but like there was a younger inexperienced driver involved. And then, these are driver behavior crashes that are not necessarily like a rural, they're sort of more conserved across the region. These might be more serious, given some of the higher speeds in the town and that type of thing versus a lower speed like urban environment. But this one was kind of, bike and ped crashes, and I believe it was all pedestrian. But you can see it's like there was one, I think all the five that, this is not the same reporting period, but, Milton, does have some, like there are people using the town's road network, walking or bicycling and, and they're getting involved in, in some serious crashes. And it looks like it's mainly on Geyser and then it looks like, parts near the village, that, around the village where it's a little more dense, but I mean, I think that one kind of stood out to me in terms of the sort of the safety condition. I don't know, Chris, or if you guys have anything to add to that. I hope I summarized the study accurately.
I mean, to be totally fair, I wasn't too heavily involved
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
particular effort. But I think that what you pulled out for the town makes sense. And, those types of crashes that are overrepresented, some of them are not preventable.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe some of them are, with things like lane departure, for example, there are some systematic improvements that you can do with curb signage and things like that. So there, some of them may be preventable. And then of course, the bike ped crashes, although it's interesting just looking at the map from here, that how far, I mean, they all look like they're on the same border, but they all also look like they're kind of like spaced apart.
Yeah.
And typically, I mean, it's not a good or a bad thing, but often you would see like all of them in the same place.
Yeah, yeah.
In a town of this size. So, I just wonder kind of what's going on.
It's interesting, there is a fair amount of pedestrian and bicycle traffic on Geyser Road, particularly, I think a couple of things. There's some neighborhood connections that come and people trying to get to the town center and or to the trail in Saratoga to the park. So I think there's
That's that main
gravitate,
corridor.
that's the main
Yeah,
corridor, I
it's like
think.
Guys, east, west, yeah, so
Yeah,
I mean.
and that's also
that's
got
where-
some bad,
Yeah,
and if you do it at dawn or dusk, and
Sure.
you see them at both times, and a lot of people wearing dark clothing, it just
yeah,
can happen. But, I see it on my way to work, I see it on my way home, and it's quite a bit on that corridor, more than I see anywhere else in the town of pedestrian, a lot of it pedestrian.
Touching a little bit on a possible solution that seems to be coming up a lot is that these crashes for pedestrians do often happen in low light conditions at night or
Absolutely.
with early dusk, so like maybe looking at some lighting solutions for the corridor. Especially simply one corridor
Yeah.
where the issue seems to be coming up.
And there's that trail we've talked with around the airport that would get a good chunk of that covered.
And there, I mean, I think since, well,
But,
Um,
the problem is you also improve it, you encourage more walking. There's more people coming, they kind of start coming from further away, and it's like, whoa, how do we balance that out? But we do certainly want to accommodate more pedestrians.
just because what's the speed limit?
35 for about a half a mile, then for a quarter mile, it's 40, and then it gets to 45. But people are probably 40 to 50 on it all the time. And that intersection of Stone Church and Geyser is one of our highest accident
There's something,
things in the
and I
town.
keep trying to figure out what it is.
Well, and then we just had the
Yeah.
subdivision for
It's,
Stone Church coming in.
yeah, but it's
And you're
something,
recommending
it's like, I'm
a
coming
four-way
to
stop there.
conclusions, it's the shadows. And the way the shadows fall on that.
Well, you get shadows, you also get direct sun. So when
Yeah.
you're
Oh, yeah,
coming out in the morning,
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of times I've turned on Middle Line Road to get onto geyser heading to the northway and it's sun in the morning, it's just right in your eyes, and somebody will be on a bike and it's like, whoa, you don't catch them right away. And same when you're coming home at sunset, it's a long stretch heading west and you get the sun for a brief period of time, but
And these, the CRTC study, like I said, was just the county and local system, not the state system, so, but the state does its own similar analysis for your system as well. I just don't, I didn't, but we didn't have that information.
Would you like that information?
I mean, that's a good question. It might not be a bad idea, given like this conversation that we've got, sort of an unusual to the experts sort of crash pattern here. And, if we've got, we wouldn't probably, as part of this process, like really drill into it, and we're not a transportation engineering firm, but to sort of know where, and,
If our traffic unit has gone to safety.
okay,
The 29 and 50. And 67.
yeah, it would be 50, 29, and 67, yeah.
Yeah.
And, on the state system, you guys would initiate those projects, based on those data as well,
It's
right?
based on the priority locations.
Yeah.
That main office sends out a list every year, and then our traffic unit does some studies, some safety analyses based on that list.
So,
I mean, like a 5-year following thing.
okay, so the safety analysis may or may not result in a project,
Yeah.
or,
Maybe not, because there's a limit to what kinds of projects trigger through that. It's like, I've come across some where they're looking for patterns. So if there isn't a clear pattern, there won't be a recommendation. So I've come across some corridors that are just so heavily traveled, there's no clear pattern. If you could pick out 10 different possible patterns, so they don't have a recommendation that comes out of that.
gotcha.
So that's another bigger conversation there about internal processes and things I think that should trigger, but.
But as we talk here and as we get into this, it may make sense to do a little bit of a deeper dive if we're gonna, or at least maybe that's a recommendation, is to, work with you and to look at and monitor, or with CRTC on the regional side, because there's a variety of strategies and recommendations within that, the local road safety plan, that are worth looking at. I'll look at as we get and work in the recommendations piece as we get closer, down. Really it's engineering, education, and enforcement, right? Are sort of the way you think about it. And you can't always engineer your way out of the problems anyway. So we're, you probably have a little more than, 10 minutes here, but we're about, I guess, maybe Chris, since we talked, and maybe Audrey and Matt, if you guys want to, like I did share the link to the story map for the New Visions update, or the CRTC long range plan. So you guys have that. There's a
Yep.
But I don't know if you want to add anything, given some of what we just talked about in sort of the overview of the town system, or what you're seeing regionally, or
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely encourage you to take a look at the in-motion plan update, story map. And, that plan is our, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is one of our federally required documents that we have to produce, which is a vision for the region's transportation system, for 25 years, but we update it every 4 years. And we're working on that now, and it's kind of like very similar to what your comp plan is, but for just the transportation network, that's setting a vision of what you want it to be. And then we have various ways that we try to make that happen, through plans, programs, funding projects. Like, for example, the Milton Town Center linkage study, which we're doing with the folks back here. But, so that's a great way to, certainly to look at what's going on regionally. I think maybe just a couple of things, trends, like regionally that we see that, maybe are just worth noting is, I mean, we're not, this isn't a region that has a ton of congestion. It's not like Southern California or Long Island or something like that. But that's not to say that there's no congestion. Most of our congestion is like, in small places, in places where, the roadway network has not kept up with development. I think, Milton is kind of a good example of why regional planning is important, because I think probably a lot of the traffic congestion issues probably are caused by a lot of the other things happening, right, with all your neighbors, which aren't bad. We shouldn't say it's a bad thing, but just a good plug for regional planning. We have some rural roads. You have some rural roads in town. I think that probably carry more traffic than you do, right? So usually, like growing up, then even though I was looking, and it seems like there hasn't been a huge population growth, right, in Milton. It's been pretty steady over the last 5 to 10 years. And
The last 5 to 10 years, yes, but there was a big burst.
Big burst, like the
In the-
90s.
No, 2010.
Oh, okay, so yeah.
And there's been, a lot of building and subdivision activity, and some of the population dynamics are related to sort of the village declining in population and the town.
So, yeah, and that's sort of synonymous with what we're seeing in the region, is that even though we're kind of a no growth or very slow growth region, people are moving.
Yeah, exurban.
Some places are growing and some places are, not everything is the same, even though we haven't grown a lot. So I think, you're kind of seeing something that's really, synonymous with what's going on in the region. As far as how people travel, we've seen a slight shift in that since the pandemic. We're seeing some more people working from home. Although that, based on, the research that we get for that, seems to be trending to less. We still traditionally in this region have your, AM and PM commute times are the most traffic. But what we're seeing in suburban areas like Milton or some of your neighbors around here is more of a bump, like in the midday traffic, which I don't know what to attribute it to. Could be work from home, could be deliveries. It's hard again to know exactly what you're doing. And like those counts that we were looking at, especially, it's really hard to tell what say is like a local delivery or something like that. There's like a van. So it could be a passenger van, it could be a Hertz van, it could be an Amazon van. We don't really know when we're looking at that data. So it's hard for us to say exactly why we're seeing a little bit of a bump in the midday traffic. And I sense that that's probably happening on some of your roads around here. The big story, and it's not very exciting in our region, is that, our infrastructure is aging. We have a lot of bridges and roads that need to be maintained, and most of our federal funding is spent on maintaining those. We don't build a lot of new things because we don't have money to maintain a lot of new things. So if we're going to build something new, it has to be like really, really needed.
Chris, what's the status of the monies that the federal government and their infrastructure plan have signed, last year before?
The bipartisan infrastructure?
Yeah.
So, the bipartisan infrastructure law, in some ways gave like more money to the pots of money that we already have coming through our, office. So money that gets programmed through our process to whatever, to fix roads, bridges, things like that. It gave a little bit of bump to that. To be totally honest, it seems like maybe the cost of construction in the meantime went up, and I don't know that it maybe resulted in a ton of more projects. But what it did do is provide many new discretionary funding programs. Meaning these are programs that don't get funded necessarily through our office. A lot of times, like the roadway owners apply directly to the federal government or the state, depending on how the programs are set up. And there are many projects in our region that have been funded through that. I don't know that I can enumerate all of them. And there are many different programs where we used to maybe just have one or two or three discretionary programs. Now there's done.
One example of that is, we have every other year, the TAP CMAQ program for transportation alternative projects. And then CMAQ is the, condition mitigation air quality. And CMAQ has traditionally been for urban areas, but then there's also now the carbon reduction program as part of that, solicitation that you can apply for, that will also apply to rural areas and covers a lot of the same types of projects that are eligible under CMAQ.
How much of that money filters down to the local level there?
That's a good question. I don't know, because some of those newer programs are direct, like federal to local, and don't pass through our office. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, generally in our office, depending on the year, we're about 80-90% of like state funded projects, what you see, Normal, Northway, interstate projects, things like that, and 10 to 20% local projects. So anything else could be the county, local, cities, towns, or villages.
Back to that idea of a hierarchy too, like not all roadways in the town are federal aid eligible. So like the town to maintain its streets or replace a bridge on its local network, it's not automatically gonna get US DOT dollars, yeah.
That's right. It has to be federal aid eligible. And there are a few, there is some safety funding that can be spent on local roads. I know this isn't safety.
I mean, from DOT's perspective, you're focused in our town really predominantly on 67, 50, and 29, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and right now,
I mean,
a couple of our bigger concerned projects you're
Yeah.
gonna be addressing in the relatively
what happens in
short
the
future.
rest of the town does affect the traffic
Absolutely,
on those
I agree.
roads. So we're not uninterested,
Yeah.
but yeah, those are our jurisdiction. Those are the roads we own and maintain.
And two of the bigger projects that we have in the hopper now, 29 in Rowland and 50 in North Line, have committed resources, right?
You're talking about the roundabouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of a 29 round of a project that's funded through that DOT applied for.
Right.
North 50 in Northline was the CMAQ
With this
project.
yeah.
I think the county was a sponsor on that.
Yes.
Thank you, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe one other point, of things that are changing slowly in the region is, we're seeing more of a demand for whatever you want to call it, active transportation, alternative modes, biking, pedestrians, trails, that shows up more and more on surveys and things of this nature that we do all the time. And I think that's been reflected in the work that's been done so far for the town center plans. And, I think that maybe it's just a reflection of shifting demographics and things like that. And now there's more availability of different, e-bikes and things like this, which everyone's trying to get their arms around. But, there seems to be more and more people who are sort of adopting things like that as a way of getting.
Chris, I can ask you specifically, what is the status of the CRT study for the town center?
So, it's underway, and I don't want to take away, you're talking about the linkage study, I think,
Yeah.
right? But
We're starting February, it's never be completed. I think end of February, 25. We have our next meeting, at this meeting, 17. And we have, held the data collection, has some public input, has some focus groups. And, our meeting 17 is to discuss the alternatives, recommendation, draft, on there. Then in January, we are, our second public event, public input event. Unveil, share the recommendations, get input from the public, finalize the report and to town board. And, right, put us all on it sometime in March. Let's focus this, town center focus.
Yeah.
Very much just north to south, just east to west.
maybe just one other point, and sorry, but to emphasize really what Audrey was saying about like, you know, about how they care about what's going on in the rest of the town. I mean, it's all about the land use, right? Like, people aren't on the roads or the trails or anything, just for no reason, typically. You're generally headed somewhere to a destination, you know, like Stone Quarry, or maybe it's Grand Industrial Park, or maybe it's your house or whatever. So, in so much as, you know, really all of these things that are listed up here and all the things that Adam went through are impacted by land use and by what you come up with for this conflict. You know, will have an impact on your transportation network. So it actually is really important. I mean, you know, the land use is sort of the fuel or whatever you want to call it for all of these trips and all of these things that happen because of the land use that's there. So, you know, definitely just want to really put an exclamation point on that.
And you know, that's our next month's topic, and that's the last one. It was a little too early for a segue, I think, but, and I think from our conversation, the, linkage study would also likely result in some land use recommendations for the town center area too. So, you know, we'll probably have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit more next month. And I know we've kind of talked about those connections previously, especially related to sort of the jobs, housing balance in the town and those types of things. So, and also kind of where to grow, right? Where to add density, where you might not want to. So that's sort of part of that discussion that we've had and kind of punctuate next month. So do you guys have any, from like the DOT standpoint, is there?
Honestly, Chris hit a lot of the points I would have talked about. Land use is, one of the big things we're running into, in that DOT has a secret policy for our projects. And you're trying not to contribute to sprawl. And so there's this tension between growing suburbs and what we are willing and able to do with our roads in terms of capacity.
And I think as Chris mentioned before, like the state and just the region specifically, we're not building, I mean, it takes a lot to add new capacity, and, you know, it's as likely to be funded by a developer as opposed to through the typical planning processes.
Yeah, and to that point, as new developments are being built, I think from our perspective, you would love it if you would focus on like a street grid that allows internal circulation and not all of the traffic needs to come out onto the larger roads in order to get to other neighboring developments. That is helpful from a congestion.
We kind of talked about that a little bit last week in terms of like connectivity among destinations, but, and I mean, one of the tools the town has, according to town law, is official street map, right? Like where the town is growing, or even where it's not right now, the town can identify, maybe as part of this process, maybe as a follow-up effort, those areas that need to serve as those collectors, and then that, any developments in those locations, there has to be some articulation to that, that official street map, so the town has some tools to sort of guide its own transportation planning, in the land use development process.
There's a hard balance in that with, neighborhood residential reactions to grid patterns and whatnot.
Yeah.
'Cause, for example, we just had a subdivision that could have connected into Geyser Crest. And there was a strong,
Yeah,
don't connect those, to the point that from an emergency services person, we're putting a gate with a knock box, but not allowing traffic to cut through. But it was purely that, backyard pressure. So we don't want that connection. And we had several developments built in the 2010s, 2010s. The goal was keep winding streets, but minimize interconnections. Rather than we would see a traditional village gridded pattern. And if streets were going through, there's concerns about how you're going to slow traffic down because people will be cutting from Rowland Street to Greenfield Avenue, if that's where the street was, as a shortcut as opposed to, like you said, just allowing neighborhood traffic to spread out. So there's a lot of balance trying to
yeah,
implement that. I agree.
And there are, in traffic calming, there's strategies, that's it, that's when we talk about the 3 E's, right? Engineering there's one of them that, especially on the front end where you're not retrofitting the street, having to deal with right-of-way issues or whatever,
Yeah, it's always a lot harder to build that, especially,
Yeah, you're not gonna correct them once they're.
some places around I've seen where when they put in a new grid, they're gonna have that connection, and a big sign like future roadway connection or something, so someone doesn't think they're buying a house on a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
You mean a note on the flat doesn't announce it to the world?
But, even then, I've seen people walk because they didn't want a connection, even in places where I thought, in my opinion, it would be better for them to be able to share their own mobility to get, right?
Yeah.
But, so that is really tough.
Yeah, there, and vehicular connections are one thing, but, we talk a lot about the non-motorized system too. And so there's maybe an opportunity there to switch the mode, right? From vehicle to, pedestrian or bicycle.
The other thing we're trying to get a handle on in transportation and traffic wise as well is how much of the traffic is being generated within the town. We proved a lot of development. We have some new developments on the books. I think there's about, last I heard count, still 40 to 50 residential units coming out of some smaller subdivisions. And then there's a 500 residential apartment development coming on. How much of that, the traffic studies we've gotten on all of these have said, well, they're not there, but cumulatively, there's going to be an effect. But how much of it's coming from, because we know Galway, Middle Grove, Greenfield, whatnot, because you can look at points through town where these neighboring towns are sending traffic to get to the same intersection. A lot of it's going to North Line and 50 to Old Post Road to exit 13 of the Northway. I mean, one of the things we may well improve some of the congestion backup we get at North Line and 50, but that's just going to accelerate the problem at Old Post and whatever that North Line is there until Malta fixes those two intersections.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it is tough to get a handle. I mean, we have some tools that we can use to estimate traffic that's through traffic versus local traffic. I mean, they're bottles, so I don't know, it's not, they're like facts, but it's something that you really wanted to know. And that's something that we could probably provide to the town if they wanted to invest that or technical assistance programs. But yeah, the other thing about the cumulative impacts, and that's a really excellent point. And often what happens is then the last person to arrive is the one who tips the scale,
Yep.
and there has to be improvements. And in New York, we're limited by law in some ways that we can address that, but there is a process called generic environmental impact statement.
Yep.
I don't know if that's something that
Yep.
we've talked about at all. If you're familiar with what that is, or,
It's,
Well-
we have it, it's good.
but that is a tool for.
But we're hoping the comprehensive plan
Yeah.
effectively is doing that.
If you're growing, I mean, the problem is you have to have some development to help fuel
Yeah.
that, right? But that's one way to get at, so, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of already familiar with how that works. Explain it, but,
Does,
so it's.
I'm not familiar with that.
So, I'll try to sort of give a simple example, like, let's say you have an intersection improvement, and, or, let me back up a second. You would look at the town's comp plan, and you would say, to realize this plan, we think, there's gonna be this many new houses, this many new amount of commercial space. And you would you have like a traffic study done for all of that. The town, that's something that the town does. And through that, they identify improvements that would be needed to actually handle all that. So all of that cumulative growth. And let's say that one of those is a turn lane at the intersection here, and it's supposed to accommodate 1,000 additional cars in, I'm just making it. But, so you have and that's gonna cost $100,000. So if you have a development coming in right here, and they have to do part of the GEIS is you have to have someone to administer it, so it costs money to do that. But you attribute 10 of those, or 100 of those trips to that.
So 10% of the
They would pay
100,000.
10% of that $100,000. It goes into an escrow. When you get up to that $100,000, you build the project.
And who determines what the traffic is like on those?
So,
For the individual
right,
business?
there are many different ways to do it. We actually do it for the town of Colony and the town of Malta. There's others who just use a more simple method, where it's just, based on an estimated generation of trips from that development, and they'll just say, if you're generating X amount of trips, we're going to attribute it to this. I mean, it can be done in sort of a more simple way. The con of it is that you have to have someone to administer all of that. I mean, it's a lot of, that's not something that, it's like, requires a lot of skill. It takes a lot of time, real resource. So that's kind of the negative of the GEIS, and of course, you have to wait until, you build up the money to be able to. So, but if you want to see an example, town of Malta has one, town of Colony has 3.
3 GISs.
Yeah, that cover small areas around. Just same thing with like Malta.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Malta's is townwide, but it's mostly.
I mean, we're actually hoping this comp plan's doing that.
Yeah.
And I would make the argument a comprehensive plan should be a GIS on steroids, because that's where you
The
really,
piece with the top plan misses, so is that P
yes,
structure.
yes.
And, yeah, I mean, and, it's rooted in the state environmental quality review process too. I mean, it used to be that for comp plans, you would do a GEIS along with it. That's kind of fallen out of favor. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's a pretty technical exercise. You need to do a build-out analysis, so you need to say, given the zoning, how much you could get of all of these spaces, then you need to do, a sort of a technical trip
Traffic
generation. Like Chris said, you gotta do a traffic study for the whole town, basically. Once it's built out. And then you gotta estimate projects, so it's, you're getting into more sort of engineering, technical work, that's driven by the future land use plan and zoning, to be sure, but, so that's where there's a little bit of a difference, but, one of the options, is, you do the, comp plan update, then you do zoning, and then you're in a good position to do a GEIS, which is based on your new zoning, And I think, I'm pretty sure, having applied for some funding through CRTC, that you guys look favorably when towns generate, their own revenue, like they're sort of the points you get when you apply.
Well, that's true, and if a town provides a higher match percentage like on a project, it just makes the cost benefit more in their favor.
Right, right.
But yeah, it's one of the few ways tools that's in the toolbox in the state of New York. We can't charge impact fee, that's just not lawful here. So other states, it's just, well, we're just gonna say $10,000 per new unit, and that's it. We can't do that.
Doesn't that drive out, small businesses?
No, I mean,
I know that, I have a friend that's putting it, and it's like really cost prohibitive,
Oh,
this GIS.
Doing a generic environmental impact statement could be very expensive, but I don't know how it would drive out small businesses.
Well,
Well, they're charging like, it's like $35,000.
Oh,
The fee.
the fee
Yeah.
that if you're gonna, your small restaurant
Right,
is gonna generate 50 trips a day and we're charging $100 a trip. So give us $5,000.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a balancing act, right? It's like, it's not perfect, right? Definitely, I think, would impact people maybe in a way that you don't anticipate sometimes, right?
Now,
yeah.
we're doing it on projects and we're kind of doing it a little bit by the seat of our pants sometimes, and the planning board's reviewing. Like with Milltown Center, traffic study was done, there were some traffic calming mechanisms, they identified a couple. The Grand Avenue failing intersection, and that would be impacted, we're getting a light there, getting some more left turn lane capacity, turning capacity that's being put in that project. It's getting costly, we were actually talking about some other things that could possibly have been done, and even the developers like adding, they've got millions
Oh, yeah.
into
Yeah.
investment, and they're starting to look at that. But, we are just looking at a subdivision now at Stone Church and Geyser. And we have conflicting traffic studies. We have one that was done by the county that says it's not warranted to have a four-way stop. And the developer did one that says, oh, it does warrant a four-way stop. So now we've got to resolve that. That would be something to traffic calm Geyser Road a little bit.
There's a couple of things too to say. One is, it might, the fees associated with a particular trip or generation might be expensive, but if you know what they are, you can plan for that, right? So, that's one thing. The other thing is, where it really costs a lot is new development. Like, if you're a small business and you're building a new building, then, you're gonna contribute to the water, sewer, the traffic, whatever. But if you're reusing an existing building, you can structure the GEIS in such a way to look at the delta. You may not get a credit.
But you may not have to pay as much.
You may not have to pay as much, it's all tied to seeker. So in theory, if it's a reuse and it's exempt from seeker, like there's no seeker process, there's no potential for impacts, so it doesn't come under the GEIS. Different places do that differently, but
Some have a threshold. I've seen some that say, anything under a certain number of units or a certain number of employees. And I'm sure that was probably aimed at trying to protect it from small businesses, but then you end up with people who are very crafty who build 4 houses at a time. Like I said, everything can be unintended consequences. but-
Adam, I think we're
Yeah.
gonna move on.
I want to be mindful. We got about 8 minutes here of our hour and a half, left.
Of our-
Agenda is not.
Of our hour?
I mean, I'd like to spend all the time on the bike and pedestrian because those are really gonna be challenging for us. I mean, there's a lot of talk, a lot of desire to see more bicycle, non-vehicle movement in the community. And until we can find ways to connect the neighborhoods in particular to, let's say, the town center, we're not gonna get much of that, or we're gonna get it in risky situations. Like I said, if more bicyclists and pedestrians use Geyser Road as it is, we're just increasing the potential for an accident to occur. So how, like you said, there's ways to mitigate it with lighting, there may be ways to mitigate it with other projects. But
So
are we planning on that? I mean, are we talking about,
Well, I think for the comp plan, at this stage, that's an unmet need and a challenge, right? So, this committee and with our support, Delaware, our task is to develop strategies, right? And so I think from a variety of reasons, from a placemaking, from, transportation, from a safety, perspective, even from an economic development or recreation perspective, there's lots of arguments for, developing more of those facilities, retrofitting existing roads with separate facilities or countermeasures or whatever. So I think our next step, this committee's next step, is to start to hang some of the meat on that. So, we'll get there. So committee is shocked, as are the audience members, that we went overtime on that topic,
No,
right?
again?
So our next topic here, our next agenda item is just to go quick through the survey, and we don't have to go crazy on that. Because I just dropped that on you. I wanted to provide some bullets, but, unless there are any other final
no, it's not.
transportation thoughts,
Yeah, I don't think anybody's had a chance to really go over the survey. Okay.
I skimmed it. I mean,
I did
thought you
too.
got some great
Yeah.
results.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
before we get there, thank you guys, thank you very much, for joining us and for your perspectives and, as we get to the recommendations and stuff, there's funding, you guys are, from a CRTC standpoint, you guys do a lot of work with municipalities so those are sort of solutions, like there are experts, and funding sources available, so.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
you come up, with these different questions that, things like data questions, things like that, we have a lot of services that we offer. We don't hesitate.
Great.
The town as a municipality can reach out to us, request. Some of these things are free or very low cost. And sometimes don't have the data, sometimes we do, but it's worth it.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
One thing I want to throw out is related to pedestrian project. Pedestrian safety is a high priority for DOT right now. So if you have a project that you want to apply for grant funding for on one of our roads that works towards completing our ADA transition plan, DOT will provide the match for federal.
Well, that's something to look into the Route 50 corridor.
Yeah.
We don't have any means of
Yep.
advancing those improvements, which do include pedestrian and multimodal improvements that are there. Plus with that new roundabout coming in, we're anxious to see the design, make sure there's pedestrian built into that. Because we have 3 projects in that core intersection that we've held and said, don't put any pedestrian access in, but no, we're gonna come to you and want it, and their approvals are contingent on some point in the future dedicating land and or money to getting those projects done, so. Having that, but then eventually connecting to the Boston Spa, that whole corridor.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please feel free to stay,
Or leave, if you want.
Had enough fun for the
Don't feel
evening. All right, we're gonna probably wrap up in the next 3 minutes.
Yes, we are.
Otherwise.
So, we have public comment, before they leave.
Yeah, before he leaves.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead. Just a quick, go ahead.
Finish the meeting. and we'll talk.
Why you don't think this area has grown much? I heard you say that a couple.
Well, it was more of a question actually than I'm not sure. I mean, I was looking at the town of Milton numbers and I'd say in the last
Yeah.
10 years.
In the last 10 years, it's
You know, I had
slowed down
the last
some.
20. Sounds like maybe the last 10 haven't been. That was really, it was more just a
Yeah.
question.
With the dates.
But no doubt, you know, and I think just sort of you and your neighbors, things even though the region as a whole, was really the point I'm trying to make, hasn't grown a lot. But this part of Saratoga County has experienced, you know, town of Boston, town of Milton, town of Wilton, Saratoga Springs, of course. So, yeah, didn't mean to mischaracterize that.
It
Yeah.
sounded like you were.
Yeah.
Really thinking, yeah, from that much. We have.
Yeah, maybe not as much in the last 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. So, survey overview, quick. So you
I've scanned it, I
scanned
Yeah,
it?
scan it.
printed it off, and John printed, looks like John printed.
I thought, number one, I thought the demographics were enlightening. Definitely was an older part of the population that
Yeah,
responded most to it.
50%.
Yeah.
Which was fine. I mean, that's the people that had the time to do it, took the willingness to do it. The other thing was some of the results. I mean, I was stunned when some of the, 38% of the people said that they get their most news about what's happening in the town on social media.
Well, the town is diligent about.
I'm just saying, that surprised me. And a lot of comments about a lack of newspaper coverage and whatnot, and that's just the general decline of newspaper coverage that's happened in this area over the years. But the other things in terms of what they were, prioritizing, what they were looking at, I thought was all very much on target with what we've been hearing.
Is this gonna be put online, the survey?
Well, that's kind of up to you guys.
It definitely.
Yeah.
I think it definitely has to be.
I mean, you were gonna be doing a little bit more work to it, correct?
We're gonna dig into, we had 540 responses, most of whom provided written responses. And if you've looked at, the bigger report, you'll see some of the responses. There's a lot of good information in there.
Yes.
that-
I start
Take some
online
time.
with just the results for now,
Yeah, okay.
because I think how many pages was it?
189 pages on the other. I mean, Barb, if they wanna put it on, I don't have an
The
objection.
whole thing?
Yeah, but put on piece, I highlight this.
Yes.
Say, here's an executive
I think
summary.
If
You wanna look at it.
15 points.
But you had this survey
Sure.
itself as a sample, and then you had that 189 pages, much of which was just all these random responses that you got, which you're correct. I mean, skimming it quickly during lunch today.
I say start with that,
Yeah.
and then you still have work to do on the other, right? You said with some of the responses and clean it.
We're gonna, what do you mean? Start with the, not the raw data, but the.
Right.
So maybe, that makes sense to me before the committee before we sort of broadcast the raw data.
Mhm.
Let's have the committee look through all that sort of texture, for lack of a better word.
And maybe add any comments that we might have,
Right, and talk, yeah, and that makes
questions or
sense.
comments.
So while we're still
But at least the
working on it.
people will have the results of the survey, the basic.
Yeah, the high points and some of the word clouds and stuff like that.
Adam, I have one question. On the question 16, please rate Milton's public services facilities based on your assessment of the current level of service. And then they're kind of like rating from, top down to the bottom. How are these supposed to be rated? Matt?
So on the top are, it's sort of reverse. So the top is, those that, people are I think it was dissatisfied.
On top.
On
Yeah.
top, yeah.
And satisfied on the bottom?
Right.
Oh, okay, that confused me because plowing and snow removal are kind of bottom.
Right.
And we do a great job in removing our snow.
And there's a sort of a weighted piece to that scale. And so, like, when I went through and pulled out some of these bullet points, which we'll also publish, like, for example, the plowing and snow removal, I mean, and I think it's worth mentioning, like, all of this last bullet here, people, a majority of people are satisfied with these, parts of the town, right, those services. So just beyond that weighted number that's summarized in that chart, like, the raw numbers of people just saying, I'm satisfied with this, is an important statistic too. And then, if you flip over to, I mean, I think on balance, people, there were smaller, less than a majority, just slightly, were, cell service, sidewalks, and broadband were sort of the top three that people were reported being dissatisfied with, so that's
Yeah.
sort of an an average, it's a calculated statistic from
You got it.
SurveyMonkey. Yeah, I mean, like, for example, I just dug in, because if you look at, the one question about, like, where one of the big, most frequently occurring words is like feel, like, I think it was question 9. So it's like, okay, what feel, what does that mean? So, and basically, if you go in, it's like small town feel, like, that's what,
Yeah.
and then multiple people said, they feel safe, or that it's rural, or that it's their hometown, these kinds of things. So that's the kind of additional sort of
How
texture.
quick do you think you can do that?
That, by next month, we'll try to get that to you a week in advance.
You could put this out as a draft then?
Right.
And say, we're gonna be doing a little bit more additions to it?
But
Put it out there.
put it out as a draft.
Draft.
Yeah, I got
And,
you.
and put it on there and say, we're gonna be digging into the individual responses and adding some of that to this.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
Okay.
Adam, was there anything that jumped out at you that you were surprised at in the results?
This last bullet was one of the most respondents reported being satisfied with travel in the town by motor vehicle on most days. Given,
what we hear a lot.
yeah, some of the conversations and, I mean, even just some of the traffic numbers and knowing, like, some of the problem
The problems
areas
on North Line.
and just sort of, but yeah, that one kind of stuck out. I think, so Milton's future, so I didn't throw this one up here. I mean, there's some conflicting information in here, because, like, affordable housing should be encouraged, but then, like, we had workforce housing as one of the housing types, and, like, that one didn't rank highly. But I mean, I think, like, this tracked pretty similar to what we've been hearing, even as part of, like, our work on the Reimagine Milton effort, where it was, we want amenities, not more necessarily commercial space, and people are, want more restaurants and stuff like that, but
Anything in question 13 that jumped out? I noticed development that should be discouraged,
right.
in particular in the rural area. We've got, your word solar farm, I don't call them farms, they're not farms.
Those-
People
those
don't-
Words, yeah.
That's right. Are we gonna address any of that?
So, and that's kind of the next cut at this, is to figure out, okay, what, you know, are we seeing that in the context of people saying preserve, you know, our rural open spaces, no solar farms? Like, that's kind of the texture that we're gonna kind of pull out.
And my problem with the solar is the taking of great farmland.
Yep.
You wanna put it on a dump, or you wanna put it in a more urban over a parking lot, et cetera. But, I mean, you don't have to go far outside the town of Millen to see what they're doing. And then they put these trees in, and they just dump them in the ground, they don't do anything to keep them living, and half of them are dried up, and it provides no buffer, it's disgusting. And there's a lot of open space right now in Milton where it could be potentially attractive to solar development. And I'm just wondering if we're ready for it, because obviously it's going on all around us.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's something we have to act on.
I mean, right now, our solar law encourages it to be located in the R2. It's the only place it can be allowed.
Yep.
It does prioritize putting it on sand and gravel, landfills, whatever, and thus far, of 5 community scale solar farms, 2 are in the sand and gravel, former sand and gravel operations, 1's on a dump. 1 is on some pretty fallow farm land, was an old horse barn, Stone Church Road, and then 1's in Rock City Falls on a little bit of a hayfield plus a little forest taken down.
One was almost backed up to a neighborhood though.
Well, the one on Stone Church was backed up on a neighborhood, and yet the developer worked with the neighbors, they got satisfied with the buffer.
And I think, you
So,
know, we.
but you're correct, John, there's 2 things. One, if it's less than 25 megawatts, it's our local jurisdiction, and you could get a sizable one in any one of those ag fields you see out in the R2.
Right.
I think the big challenge, difference we have than what you're seeing like south on Middle Line is the connection to the substations doesn't exist right now. That
Right.
doesn't mean it's not gonna exist. If it's bigger than 25 megawatts, we don't have any say about it. And I don't know how big those ones on Middle Line are. There's a couple when you go out 67 that are over 25 megawatts, and that's all state jurisdiction.
And so, like, we had talked about this as part of the ag conversation, and, I think also as part of the local economy, the conversation we had too. And then, you know, that's, next month is, you know, one of the recommendations I think we should be eyeing is, you know, updating the town solar, you know, regs, just to keep up with the state of the art, the state of the industry, but then also with the future land use vision that the plan's gonna lay out, so.
I agree, absolutely.
Okay. Don, that's around to 4. Land use?
Yeah, and you know, I think this is probably, and I have to touch base with Mary Beth, and if you guys have any other thoughts, probably just gonna be this committee and us going through, the topic, and, I don't know that there's anybody else we want to fight, or if there are other.
I mean, the only one you might
things
turn to
you guys
is
might
Jeff
want us to
Williams
look
at the,
into.
Jeff Williams at the county, based on what he sees of
Who was that?
Jeff Williams at the county. I mean, we refer a lot of projects to him, and you get,
Yeah.
once in a while, you get, I mean, I think what we'll hear from him is a lot on stormwater, a lot on, wetlands. Because those tend to be the things that they're constantly commenting on our projects with, and making sure. And then the other big one they are commenting and weighing in a lot more on is sewer and water connections.
And if anybody comes up with someone you think might,
But outside of that, I think you're right.
you can let us know before the next meeting.
Or another, you know, another avenue also is if there are particular, like, issues or recommendations that you want us to research and bring to the table. If there are questions that you want, you know, additional information about, maybe give that some thought over the next week or so, drop me an email.
Okay, public comment.
Okay, I have too many for you to handle tonight. So I am gonna try to go home and put this in some kind of form, because I do have a lot of relevant questions. But I was interested, I think I heard you say that they don't wanna put a four-way at Stone Church, but that was one of my.
No, one of the things on that project is the county shared with us a study that their transportation engineering work did, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, that said it didn't warrant, it wasn't failing enough to warrant a four-way stop. Traffic analysis that's being done for the Cesar Brothers subdivision that we're currently looking at right now is saying, yes, the traffic study
Great
says
idea.
it does warrant, and if you recall, when they did it a year and a half ago as well, that came up. So we've had 2 traffic studies that said it probably warrants it, and one that the county had.
Are
So
traffic studies expensive? Like I see those.
they're not outrageous, they're not outrageous. I
Traffic, I don't know.
mean, we've been getting them for every major subdivision we do. It's not super outrageous, but you're only getting a very localized
Yeah.
assessment. You're not getting some of the work that these guys are doing in your town centers a little bit.
Yeah. I think it needs to go all around.
No, I hear you, but, so that's what it is. So we've asked Sophia, the town planner, to go meet with DPW and say, all right, what are we gonna do? We got these studies that are saying it warrants a four-way, and just figure out, is the county against it, or, I mean, they typically don't wanna add impediment.
The town
No, it's up to, the county has jurisdiction on that intersection,
is, okay,
county.
County.
oh, the county, that's.
County road.
So we're meeting with them to say,
Okay.
what do we do?
Yeah. That's a straight line from this intersection all the way to Middle Line.
Yes.
So that's like.
Well, so it's coming this way.
And that is that is the most T-bone accidents in the town.
That surprised me when you said that.
It
Like,
is.
wow, okay.
Been a lot of bad
So
accidents
it
there.
seems like that would be a real easy fix.
We're inclined to say yes, we gotta get the county.
So now, also, when you do the traffic studies, I think it would make sense to do it at different times of the year, because like the summertime, you have a lot more traffic. And we also had Navy coming back after 5 years
Yep.
of being away. And I'm not quite sure your husband would know, I think February, right? is
Yeah.
They're coming back.
Mhm.
Now, they don't have as many plants going as they did years ago, but there's still, that's gonna
You had
add
more
to
people.
our traffic
Yep.
study, so.
Oh, yeah.
So the difficulty there, unless the town's doing the traffic studies, the developer's gonna do the traffic study in the time frame they've got to review their application. So if they come to us in the spring, an application, they're gonna do it in the spring.
Right.
If they come in August, okay, well, we'll do it, and it happened to be during the peak of the track season.
And maybe just to put some context, I mean, we're talking about the town's comprehensive plan and vision for 20 years on,
Right.
what the town wants to be. I mean, the comp plan isn't really going to get to the level of detail of individual intersections or even talk about traffic study methodology. What we might recommend and talk about a little bit here is how do we look at traffic cumulatively across the town, and what are some tools the town has to accommodate
Doing that.
future land use vision. So just to kind of bring it back to where, to the
So
topic
some of
here.
these questions might be better at another meeting, but, I'm gonna put these all out, I'd like to
Sure.
present it to you or give it to you, right? And then if they are to be shot to the town meeting or whatever.
Sure.
Because I'm listening to all this and there's so many
I
questions.
said, we'll do a wrap up at probably the meeting after the next one, correct? Maybe the February meeting, and start putting some of these things together. Definitely your questions, Adam should be, if you send them to me, I'll make sure Adam does.
Yeah.
Now, you said the buses, is it up Broad Street already? I haven't really seen it.
I think it just started.
Just, October 12th or something like that.
The date on this was October.
Like I said, once in the morning, once in the evening
Yeah.
it comes through.
And do they have bus stops?
There's you'll see a few markings.
If they're not up yet, they will be.
Okay, because.
October is-
I'm not, I actually don't know if
Yeah.
they put the markers back, to be honest with you.
Okay, Well, like I said, I have a lot of notes here, and I know it's not enough to go over tonight, so I will put them together because I'm very interested in.
Get them
I
to,
think
get them to me, and we'll get them to Adam and we'll work on it. Okay? Can we adjourn?
Well, does anybody else have?
Oh, I'm sorry. You want to say something?
Just real quick, I've done heavy civil construction for the state and presently the state and privately. The amount of money that DOT was at 15 billion this year, give or take in the fiscal year budget. You know, over 52% of our bridges are 50 years plus or older. I can tell you right now that you don't want to drive over most of the bridges that you drive. So repairing what we have already will cost billions. The more truck traffic that we put on our roads, not just in Milton, but everywhere, the more that we expand our roads to, whether you're changing load ratings, weight ratings, bridges that you're going to be carrying trucks over now. You have Regeneron, you have an airport, like, we're expanding in a way that the infrastructure itself will have to expand. When you're talking about sidewalks, that's $100 to $150 a yard for concrete. You're talking about sidewalks,
Yeah.
miles. Like, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
DOT has 11 regions in the state. And I'm gonna tell you right now, Region 1 isn't the most popular when it comes to 11 downstate, right? So the city. Well, you know what I mean. Right. But what I'm getting at is that when we look to the state for funding, the longer that our infrastructure deteriorates, which it is every single year, the more money that is going to be put to that and not new projects, right? New things that we want to ask the state for money for, right? So again, focusing on where we want to develop, where we don't want to, taking a look at the overall plan of where trucks are going to be going, where traffic is going to be going. Rock City Road, that little bridge that they just finished this year, less than 100-foot span, was over $1 million.
Yeah.
So just think about that in the scale of what we're talking about. So, you know, we're talking about making these truck routes, where those truck routes run, right through the R2. Right, so now farmers, people who want a small town feel, have heavy truck traffic all day long going past their property. So maybe take a look at the survey and what was said in there, the number one thing, small town feel. Fiscally, it's not gonna be very small for very long. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Next meeting is January 7th? Fourth?
January 7th.
January 7th, 6:30.
Tuesday is late next month.